Hey folks, this is the Lil Guillotine Podcast, episode 14. I'm in Revolover Audio. We're in Revolover Audio Studios with Brad LeBaron.
Welcome, everybody.
And Ross Wagner.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Welcome to the studio.
Thanks.
And so I know both of these folks from the International Socialist Organization. There's a little trend. That's how we met anyways. No one's in there anymore, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But that's how I met.
I think there are still some people somehow finding a way to be in there.
Well, are there people trying to keep certain stuff afloat there still, or?
Well, I know that Sharon Smith and I'm gonna forget the name. Ahmed Shaki, and then the other person, Joel Geyer, have tried to or have started another organization.
Okay.
And it's going to be cleansed pure of all of the flaws in the ISO.
Right.
Rest assured. I think there was also definitely an effort among some of the middling cadre to rebrand themselves as not part of the problem.
Yes.
So that they could take leadership positions in whatever new formations rose from the creepy ashes.
There was one quote from Sharon Smith talking about, it's a more recent one that I never discussed on here, but it's talking about there have been a better way for folks to argue that we should join the DSA than destroying the ISO, as if that was the catalyst behind the destruction of the ISO. Was just that folks thought you should join the DSA since that's big, a big growing organization or whatever.
Oh,
completely irrelevant argument.
Yeah. I was about to say, I don't think that's have anything to do with one another. Because the ISO. Well, I mean, I was in it after the incident happened, and a lot of the people, at least that I came up with in the ISO, had no idea about any shady shit having happened, So,
right.
Yeah, it would have been cool to know about that happening in our branch.
So Ross Wagner's joining us here today in Revolover Audio Studios, and Ross is in the band called Egg Pants, or Egg Pants Band.
No, that's just our Instagram, because there's a cat who at least used to have all of the social media pages. So Facebook, Instagram, Egg Pants is all taken by this cat that won't add me back or anything, but we
that's
can't
unfortunate.
use the name. So yeah, we're Egg Pants.
The internet loves cats.
There's a feline named Egg Pants?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, okay.
At least that's the account name on every social media.
Right on. So y'all just had a show this last Saturday, right? How did that go?
It was cool. We played with 90s Dream Boy and Gender Confetti, and they were both, building on a lot of momentum. Gender Confetti, it was their last show on a tour coming back, and 90s Dream Boy came out with an EP, and we hadn't played a show since October, I think. It was cool because they filled up to capacity, and all those people showed up before we started. So, we had to play to a packed house before them. And we actually founded the band at a Gender Confetti show almost a year ago. I ran into a couple of those people, and we were like, let's start a band.
Oh, cool.
What do we call it? Let's call it Egg Pants. And yeah, so
that was just the first thing that was said. Let's call it Egg Pants.
No, it's kind of an idea I'd had from previous stuff.
Okay.
And when they were, two of the members were there, and then we added a fourth member the next day. But when they were really psyched by the idea of calling it Egg Pants, I knew it was gonna be a good.
Yeah, no, I think it's a solid band name. Yeah. Egg Pants.
What's the?
Because it makes you think eggplants. But
it's not eggplants.
But it's not eggplants. It's egg pants.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah, it draws a picture in your head, kind of,
Yeah, what is the?
But you're not sure what it is,
right? What is the history of that name? Why did you choose that?
It's kind of just a odd story with an old roommate of mine where he was saying egg pans, and I thought he was saying egg pants, and so I was like, that's a good band name, and like we were trying to make a band at the time, but he hated the name, and like the more I suggested, the more he hated it, the more I suggested, the more I suggested, the more he hated it. So I was like kind of like, you know, reluctant to suggest it to this new group and be like, oh, I don't know, I kind of really wanted to name a band Egg Pants, and they were really into it.
Yeah.
Neither of them were musicians at the time, so it's all kind of been starting from scratch.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. We just like do a lot of stuff. And
were you a musician before it?
Yeah, I've played various instruments since I was a kid, but like I haven't really done a lot in bands in a long time. Yeah,
I've been thinking of joining a band recently.
So would you describe y'all as like into social activism via the band necessarily, or?
No.
I was gonna say I've never done it for that. Well, actually, I have done it for that purpose, but for the other side, unfortunately.
Oh right,
yeah. I used to be in a very pro-life, anti-choice pop punk band.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. But I have since renounced that, and
what's up?
But I haven't. I don't know, that experience with that industry kind of turned me off to the idea of like of doing that way. This is my way of activism right here. You know what I mean? But I respect the fuck out of it.
Hell yeah.
I would say Egg Pants is definitely subversive in the sense that we kind of like, not terribly consciously, but we do kind of like poke at and break down certain like tropes and imagery and even like the idea of what a band is. You know, like we kind of like we post stuff on Instagram that's like, you know, not really clear who we are or what we're doing, and like it's not easy to find our music yet. We're hoping to change that, but
right.
Yeah. No, that takes some time to figure out.
Yeah, so the whole the capitalist branding aspect of having being a musician is definitely daunting and shitty to have to participate in. The task of making money in anything in the society is pretty soul crushing, or you have to engage in bullshit a lot for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like it's flawed by design.
Yeah, as opposed to just being able to like create art and shit. You gotta be engaged in capitalism in some way or form.
Yeah.
Which means that you have to be kind of catering your creativity to some unknown marketable audience instead of doing what you want to do or what comes to you, whether it's popular or not.
Which is kind of what happened to like YouTube after it like kind of became a traded company or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Like basically since then people have been, cowtailing it to the advertisers like as much as they possibly can, and it's, I don't know, some of YouTube's just become what basic cable turned into. It's just a bunch of talking heads that are trying to sell you products so they can make enough money to make their next video.
I think overall there's a lot less public consciousness of that fact about YouTube, though. Like with television, people always knew that was the deal.
Well, people think YouTube is outside of the equation or something, but it's not. It's part of the media playing field now.
There's who's the kid? He's like a millionaire. It's like he was the youngest millionaire or like multimillionaire from doing the unboxing videos.
Oh, right.
Like that kid's gonna run for president someday. Like.
It's going to be
a billionaire in like 30 years, and
a weird class of those like Bitcoin, like
nobody's going to question
winners
why he's able to do that. Or
yeah,
no doubt.
But it's something that I'd like to figure out and participate in without selling my soul or whatever. Feeling like that at least. I'm sure there's products like you can support. It's fine. If you believe in a product, but like, I don't know, when they talk about like 5 different products within like one episode and they talk about it like it's their favorite thing, it's like, are literally all of these advertisements your favorite thing? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Or you're slaves to the algorithm if you want to just try to get enough views so that the YouTube can sell advertising time on your videos, and then you don't have to talk about a product necessarily. Folks who do that, it's hard to scrape a living unless you have like multi-million subs, and then of course folks are always trying to make more money or whatever. You don't necessarily have to mention products, although people who do make more money obviously.
Yeah.
When you're doing
those
affiliate shit.
Those are those videos that are promoted more, are the ones that are they are well integrating the product stuff well into their just like a.
Well, they if you can keep people on YouTube, that's what YouTube cares about, because then they can sell ad space to folks.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be advertisements happening, but you slave to the algorithm or whatever.
But I guess my question is this something that people need? Because like there's obviously problems with the structure of YouTube and social media and the commercialization of it, but these are new technologies that didn't exist in our lifetimes. And like obviously they were better when they were free platforms that didn't cost as much money to run, but like you could kind of just join it and do what you want. But they were planning from the beginning to do this. All of
that's kind of the big catch-22 of the internet and social media.
YouTube is the second largest database of information, like on a search platform in the world.
Because like they do have to make like a certain amount of money to run the servers. But
Spotify. Algorithms, they're banking on probably being also big into the human behavioral data, like selling ad space to advertisers, being able to like predict people's moods based on like what kind of music they're listening to, and then decide what songs to play next based on that, and then of course what kind of ads that you can show to people depending on what kind of mood they are in. So
well, it's interesting that from the beginning, the advertising industry has arisen in tandem with psychology as a science, and like the technology and the techniques of marketing and advertising have always been at the forefront of making use of the latest in psychological research and theories. Going back, well over 100 years.
Yeah, Bernays, what was it? Freud's like nephew or whatever. Was like one of the big proponents of using his, uncle's work to, basically create modern consumerism, I guess.
Public relations
industry. I think it was what Betty Crocker was one of the first experiments with that, where it was like instead of just selling like a cake mix, they'd sell a cake mix with a picture of a housewife putting it into the oven, so that they could relate when they're going to the grocery store, and not feel guilty for buying a cake at the store instead of making one from scratch.
The spectacle of consumerism. Are you familiar with any Guy Debord works, Ross?
No.
He talks about like the spectacle of consumerism and how.
Was that a documentary?
Guy Debord wrote a bunch of books on these theories.
I think there might be a documentary of the same name.
Sure, yeah. Just talking about how like capitalism. So I never read any, so I'm just doing a synopsis of what I've heard. Capitalism relied on, of course, people being consumers to a certain point, and then there's this spectacle thing that arose to like the spectacle of being the person in the shoes. It's got to be the shoes, whatever, having the product, and how that plays into the psychology of consumerism, which helps capitalism.
Yeah,
and it's more deeper than that. I was hoping you had read some, honestly.
Well, I have a background in political economy, so I'm aware of a lot of these concepts, but
right?
Not this work in particular.
Yeah. Okay. So bringing it back to the band stuff, do you all plan on making money with music? If you did you all get paid? Saturday?
I think there's payment for us. I haven't been the contact person for any of that, but like I think Mickey's is a paying venue.
Right.
So, like, you actually get paid to play there. I'm not clear on that, but then there's, like, the tip jars and stuff.
Oh, cool.
Well, I know Madison's pretty good about trying to pay, out-of-town performers for their traveling.
Yeah, and, like, the tip jars are usually, especially, like, we've opened for some touring bands from New York and Chicago. Yeah. And, like, it makes sense for them to get that money that people are tipping in, because our expenses are kind of just flat in terms of, like, driving to Tip Top and setting our gear up.
It's pretty amazing you can do regular shows in Madison. Like to be able to do a show at least once a month in town is
I would love to be able to do that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And a lot of bands can do that. A lot of bands do that.
Yeah. It's an expensive hobby to have if you're not getting paid.
Yeah.
And also it takes quite a bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't mesh with, like, working to accumulate funds to pay for stuff that you then don't have time to use. And that's kind of like one of the classic, middle class traps in modern society is, people who work all their adult lives accumulating a large amount of stuff and having to pay for a house that can store all of that stuff. And they don't really use most of it. It's just taking up space. And then, like, the labor that went into producing that in a global economy and shipping it around the world and, like, displacing factories from this country to this slightly poorer country where wages are a little bit less than in the other country. And, like, all of these calculations are happening and all this profits being made by these companies so that some, junk can sit in a den or a basement or a garage somewhere because, like, people devoting their lives to obeying their corporate masters still have, like, dreams of having a life with freedom, but they don't actually get to act it out except through the act of purchasing commodities at a store or online or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I deliver to a lot of these families with giant houses, a bunch of stuff, and I just, every time I see, like, a house that's, like, just too big, I'm like, I wouldn't want to live in that house.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like I'd be wasting it.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's just, I don't know, I think that you should be conscious of, what space you're taking in the world and all that, and as far as the musician thing goes, like, I think that I've always had the philosophy that if you're going to get into music or art or whatever, you kind of have to be prepared to not be really successful for, like, 5 to 10 years, if that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's a slim chance at best when you start. And what really, separates people that make it for a living, I think, and people that don't is, I guess, keeping on top of it and, I guess, being able to make time for your creativity. Like, if you have a family, that can be very hard. Liam, you kill it and you fucking keep shit going. But, like, it's something that, like, if you have a 40-hour-a-week job, it's really physical. It might be hard to maintain that even. So,
or if you don't have other adults who can, who your children can be with. Like,
that's true. That's true.
How many people are the only adult in their kids' lives?
Yeah.
So, like, there is no maneuverability for a lot of people in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
George Carlin had the joke about, you get a house so you can put your stuff in it, and then you get more stuff so you get a bigger house so you can put your more stuff in it and shit like that. I don't know if there's any George Carlin fans. Do you remember?
Yeah, he said shit. Yeah.
Shit.
You buy shit.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
7 things you're not supposed to say.
I thought you were trying to avoid saying shit for some reason.
I wasn't.
And then,
shit.
And
then another thing I've heard a lot is this theory that you have to spend at least $10,000 or so on advertising your, music before you can expect to get a return on investment or whatever.
Cool.
And so, that's a similar type of, like, analysis around the 5 to 10 years thing, and so in some way one or the other is true, or both together, or something somewhere in the middle. Because you could have the best music in the world, but people aren't gonna be able to hear about you unless you're fucking traveling a lot and doing shows and opening for huge crowds all the time in different cities, or spending your money on advertisement.
Well, and sometimes it means working jobs that don't necessarily have the most respect from your parents. Say like waiting tables and like delivering and stuff and doing stuff where you can make tips.
Do you think being a musician has respect from most people as a profession, or the people
it's not seen as
I know,
a profession.
right. Even if you do make money,
it's not something that your parents might even call a profession,
or even folks in society really like, oh, you're a rapper.
If you listen to any successful creative person, like they'll have all these stories about waiting tables and working menial jobs.
Well, the other thing too is like this concept of success has this sort of embedded unspoken meaning in capitalist society, which means that you're not only making money doing it, but that you're basically famous. That kind of goes along with it's all wrapped up in these concepts, and people use this word success as a sort of euphemism for that whole structure. But success in any situation is something that you always have to define. You set out to do something, you set goals, and attaining those goals is your measure of success. And people actually skip most of that process because they jump straight ahead to like, not I want to have written highly regarded music or poetry or painted something in a museum or something, but rather like, I don't want to live this bullshit life anymore. That's kind of what most people are thinking about when they break into a lot of creative endeavors. It's just like they have a certain amount of talent, or they have a certain amount of creative drive, but there's also just this huge weight hanging around everyone's shoulder of like, you have to be successful, and successful if you're not famous or not creative or not an artist of some sort is basically the middle class standard lifestyle. That's the generic standard definition of success for anyone who doesn't have quote unquote ambition to do more than that. So I don't think it's meaningful to really talk about how to become successful as an artist, especially in essentially a post-capitalist society where the entire music industry has hollowed out to the point where the only people who ever are really making a lot of money, the way that like rock musicians and rappers did 20, 30, 40 years ago, the only people who are doing that now are very standardized, like mass-produced, commodity celebrity types who are marketed as personalities and images before anybody millions of people know who these folks are and like have never heard their music and don't know really anything about them. That's what success has morphed into in the music industry, and that's not a reasonable goal, and it's not an attainable goal in today's world for people who are actually just trying to create things. And it's not really valuable either.
Well, my measure of artistic success is just being able to live with it. You know what I mean? Being able to make enough money to keep doing it.
Yeah. Have you heard?
And if I like the artists that have like underground credibility and like aren't the people that you're seeing on like NBC, CBS or whatever, but they're the people that they're my podcast people, I guess, that are kind of the B or C list people. If you're gonna go to that celebrity standard or whatever.
That brings up like another theory about success in the music industry. Not a mainstream success one, but it talks about in making money or whatever. Try to get 1,000 true fans. Have you heard this theory? It comes up a lot. Yeah, right.
Well,
if they could spend $100 a year on you, that's $100,000.
That's similar to my the old plan that people would always say to me was like, you have to create a tour circuit.
Right.
That's like not like national necessarily, but like within your section of the nation.
I mean, I wish I could do that with my kids.
Within like maybe 6 hours, 6 hour circle or some shit.
Yep.
And if you can get like
the 8 hour,
like
But
maybe
you don't have
towns, 8 towns that you could, if you want to tour, if you want to do it that way. If you can get like 8 towns where like 20 people show up at like each time you come over through that town or something, then yeah, you can keep it going. Like the Hometown Sweethearts, it's a local band that plays at Crystal a lot, but they also do like covers of like stuff, do like wedding shit, and they're doing it all full time because that's all they do.
Right.
But they're also like a kind of poppy band. But
yeah.
Anyway, sorry, we went on kind of a tangent there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think that I think you don't have to do anything with your talents, with music, with art. Like, you know, if I can play music that I like listening to after the fact and it's fun to play, and especially like doing it with people and we have fun doing it as a group, you know, to me, that's a level of success that is much higher than what I've been able to attain at various points in my life. So, like, being satisfied with what you're able to do, I think is important for its own sake. And it's actually a capitalist worldview that's constantly telling us that we need more than we have while simultaneously taking things away from us. Yeah. And so, you know, you still, even though things are always being taken away from you, especially your time and the effort it takes to accumulate money that is always being taken from you, you know, we do have things. That's part of being alive, is you have things. You have people in your life. You have a body. You have skills. You have, you know, thoughts and feelings and opinions. And those things are with you until you've lost them. And it's often the pursuit of success and ambition that takes those things away from you while giving you, you know, trickling into your life the semblance of the thing that you sort of thought you wanted at the beginning but didn't have a clear conception of. And so, like, a lot of bands, a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, as well as like business people and like career-minded professionals and all sorts of people who are just like scrambling to climb something, they're scrambling up this ladder, not realizing that like all of their possessions are falling out of their pocket on their way up. You know, like that people just kind of lose sight of what life is about when they tap into a lot of these structures. And a lot of people spend so much time doing things they don't want to do or revolving around their passion that like the whole kind of concept has morphed into something that is marketable, that is profitable and benefits the system without necessarily giving you what you wanted at the beginning. Maybe your perceived needs or ambitions have changed along with it, but that's also part of the whole rat race career structure.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like when people are, you know, chomping at the bit for overtime in a really physical job, and then they're just always, all they do is talk about how hard they work all the time and how much better they are because they do that. And it's like a really like masochistic kind of thing, because it's it changes them, you know, kind of forever because of how it destroys their bodies and makes them angry about their situation, even though they say that they love it.
But I think in a certain way, in a masochistic sense, I think they do derive pleasure from that ritualized expression of fatigue and exhaustion and exertion and superiority to everyone else.
It takes away a little bit of your responsibility in your off hours, because like you get this whole like idea that like, oh, everyone owes you their time because of how hard you work all the time. Which is kind of an unfair onus to put on people, since you know they have no control over what you decide to do with your body. But it is this kind of really toxic thing that we have in the, you know, the American like working class, I guess, where they don't see the clear exploitation that is occurring, and they just, you know, they buy into the OT myth,
a soul crushing, self-exploitative work ethic.
Yeah.
I think along with that, there's also a sort of what I found to be a big gap in Marxist thinking, which has defined workers' interests for them in terms of material gain. And it allows a simplification of every relationship to show how business owners and employers are deriving value in quantified terms of money from the work that their workers do. They pay less than the value of the work done, and that's where all profit comes from.
And
exactly. So, that's true in the sense of money and wages and exchange, but it's also not true that that's the beginning and end of what defines self-interest for anybody, including workers. And so this becomes a lot clearer when you're talking about like white supremacy and sexism and things like that, where white workers actually do benefit on their own terms from being part of master race in their worldview, even if they are getting more exploited economically in the process. They actually derive benefit from that means more to them than having an equal wage to their coworkers of color and women coworkers and so on. And Marxists have tried for generations to force down people's throats that that's not real, that those people aren't actually benefiting in that way. And it's true that they're conditioned to value that and socialized for it, but it's also true that they aren't choosing to trade that in for better wages and healthcare and union representation and various forms of equality that would lessen the level of economic exploitation through the workplace, and that workers actually do somewhat willingly participate in this when they buy into these ideologies, but they're free to do so. And once they do, the whole calculation of what is a material gain changes for that person, and a Marxist can't just tell them that they're wrong about that. It's actually more about we're not on the same side, and there's a limit to the ability to create working class solidarity as long as these divisions exist amongst people, and people can be persuaded by various means to abandon these ideologies, but the ideologies are real and they have material force in society and in the economy and in politics that can't be, they don't get erased by, if you can't prove to a racist person in West Virginia that they're worse off working in a coal mine because of racism. Even if you can prove it through math.
Yeah, I was about to say you can, but you can't.
Well, you're talking about different things entirely, and so they're not valuing the thing that you're telling them they're valuing. And so that's why this hasn't worked for all of these generations, among other reasons.
I mean, especially if you've been. If you're from, say, evangelical or Baptist background and you've been taught that the earth is 6,000 years old, you're going to be a little easier to be, told other things that are that ridiculous.
But that the constancy of having that kind of worldview matters to people, and most people are somewhat willing to believe things that aren't plausible in exchange for a sort of psychological stability.
I was I think
it's psychological wages of whiteness.
Yeah, the psychic wages of whiteness.
And, that's what Frank Witherson makes his arguments in Afro-pessimist theory about how it's going to take more than a Marxist revolution or a revolution against the capitalist class in order to get rid of racism. It has the ability to exist into the, after a communist revolution, obviously. Well, it's going to, because, the Marxist doesn't offer any other thing besides political, economic equality. There's no, psychological, thing. There's no psychological wages being offered when it comes to communist revolution. None that are sort of can take the place of the wages of whiteness, and I think what it comes down to is there's a
desire among Marxists to want to believe that such people are not participating in constructing this social system every day, and they are willingly. They're not on the same side as us. They can be brought onto our side, but not not through this sort of cold economic calculation strategy, but rather through actually trying to dismantle the structures of white supremacy despite their fights and protests. And like the fact that people turn to fascist movements and ideologies is a demonstration of this phenomenon, that people actually are willing to turn to violence and to organize politically around trying to prevent social equality, in a way that kind of destroys this ideological framework that tells some of the poorest people in the world that they're actually part of a master race, or the dominant sex, or heteronormativity, and like all these things that tell you that you're normal, that you're good, that you're better than other people, that you're special, without having to have done anything for it. You were born this way. Like, that's an important thing that matters more to a lot of people than like a small wage raise or improved labor conditions or whatever, because this goes to bed with them at night.
So it would take a complete destruction of society as opposed to a communist revolution.
Well, because your worldview affects, like, how you act in the world. Whether you think that people are, innately more like evil than good or whatever, maybe, as in like wanting to cause harm to others versus wanting to help others. What you actually think about, what drives humanity, I think, is something that comes into play. Especially when you're talking about like, eugenics before World War II and all that. Like it was very socially acceptable to be talking about these quote unquote race sciences, and talking about openly about all the differences and stuff between races in a way that inevitably became the horrible genocide thing that happened. But like it's this, I think we're in a similar place where we're getting more comfortable talking about those things in a very toxic kind of nasty way that reminds me of like eugenic.
When you say we, are you talking about like
I guess we as in just what the murmurings I sift through on the internet, I guess. But I think that there is like you need to understand the ideology that informs those kinds of thoughts. You need to understand all of the steps of ideology that lead to Nazism to, understand Nazism, for the really old school plain example. But
that brings up a question that I've been pondering about. Is like, you hear these terms that wokeness is trendy, right? Which I think is not an accurate way to describe it. I think another way you could talk about it is like liberalism is co-opting sort of like anti-racist and revolutionary language into its like mainstream, and then how like
privilege.
And this wokeness is trending,
the
quote
privilege
unquote
thing thrown at me.
Yeah, but it's still like the wages of whiteness, I don't think, are any less and any less powerful than they ever were. It's just that those folks who are earning those wages are using this different language and shit like that.
I would disagree with that. I think the psychic wages of whiteness are significantly less valuable now than they were 30 years ago, certainly more than 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Like, that era is coming to an end, but things don't break cleanly. There's a whole generations-long process where the people in the remnants of a sort of decaying ideology become ever more intense and aggressive once they realize that if they don't do anything, are on the way out. And it's not inevitable. That's the key thing, is, this heightened energy and aggression that comes with perceiving their sense of diminishing legitimacy in society does give them a chance to renew their lease on life for generations. And that's why it's important to kind of figure out the dynamic that leads to this over and over again, because what ends up happening is kind of like liberals see that they sort of think that they've won the fight, and now, like, you know, let's all just get in line behind Hillary Clinton because we won now. We had a black president, and, like, you know, let's just follow a sort of cleanup operation. And they don't realize that there are these people, a large, very large group of people, tens of millions of people, who still have the power once they sort of waken from their complacent dormancy of having been the master race for so long. Not without having to do anything to maintain it, but you know, except work their whole lives and join the military and, like, you know, all of that. But suddenly they realize that if they don't fight for what they see as their way of life, it could disappear forever, and they fight, and they have the potential to win. And liberals tend to give them a leg up when they create these narratives around, you know, history and the arc of history kind of bending one way or the other, as though, like, there isn't a chance for things to go another way in a much worse direction. And then they do over and over again, and nobody really ever understands why, and we kind of just forget about it. You know, people don't really know what was going on 30 years ago, which is just kind of...
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and, I mean, like, there's a lot of people that sound straight up like Confederates sounded back in the day when they were talking about states' rights. You know, I read Black Reconstruction by W.B. Du Bois, and he had a lot of quotes from, you know, post, you know, the Civil War Confederate senators and stuff trying to, and yeah, like, they're making the same, like, you know, like, states' rights arguments about, you know, like, oh, you know, states' rights, not slavery, and like blah blah blah, and they're starting, and it's crazy how many I don't know, people sound just like that nowadays.
Confederate flag still on 3 states, at least in some way, shape, or form. So you
and
mentioned
Alberta, Canada, apparently has a big Confederate flag thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just learned that recently.
Like on their province flag?
No, not on the province
Just like
flag. Just a lot of
trend.
people.
Okay,
yeah, a lot of people.
Because we
flying
actually
the Confederate
have
flag.
the Confederate flag as, like, worked into 3 different states'
Like,
flags.
it's flying on the Capitol buildings. And,
Yeah.
Didn't one of them get changed though?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean,
recently.
more than one, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So you mentioned Elizabeth Warren, or no, you mentioned Hillary Clinton. Maybe Elizabeth Warren is more relevant. And before we started the show, y'all talked about, like, 3 folks in the Democratic presidential primary race dropping out today. I knew Pete Buttigieg had dropped out yesterday, and
the other 2 I didn't recognize as much.
Yeah, Tom Steyer's another billionaire.
Yeah.
And he's, like, head of Starbucks. Or like,
all right. Yeah,
and
he
was the other one the female author?
Klobuchar, not an author.
She was a politician,
Minnesota.
governor or senator.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Senator from Minnesota.
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't feel dumb personally not knowing, because I have been waiting for it to thin, because I think that some of them are frankly in there to I don't know, get a career going.
Yeah.
So I've been waiting for it to thin out, and I'm glad that there's.
And I know
less
Tom
now.
Steyer had invested months and tens of millions into South Carolina, and trying to win, like, it's 60% black folks comprise the votership in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so the South Carolina primary, which was the Saturday 2 days ago, was supposed to be this test, because it was the first time that there was, like, a majority black folks, or even anything significantly black voters.
Yeah.
And so it was this big testing ground for both Biden as well as Tom Steyer, who had both, put a lot of money and effort and time into campaigning in South Carolina. I know Steyer did really bad in South Carolina, so therefore seen as, like, an illegitimate and non-electable. But if Biden hadn't got, like, first in South Carolina, I guess he would have been dead in the water as well. But he ended up getting first by a landslide over, and Bernie Sanders got second there with 20% or so. But yeah, so but also, Pete Buttigieg dropped out, which was a little bit surprising to me, but then not, because I know that like Democratic National Committee and the folks who are, the stalwarts and the higher ups of the Democratic Party were pressuring folks to drop out, basically so that they could, because they see Bernie Sanders as like a threat or whatever, and they're going to have to deal with the problem of Bernie Sanders. And as long as there's so many folks who are, running under the we're more electable than Bernie Sanders mantra, it becomes more difficult for the Democratic Party to sort of deal with the threat of Bernie Sanders.
Because they all keep losing.
Yeah.
Elections.
Yeah, and like splitting all their votes against it. So it's like I saw Pete Buttigieg dropping out as like, consolidating, and the fight against Bernie Sanders by the Democratic Party.
Well, it's definitely pretty blatant dropping out the day before so-called Super Tuesday,
right?
Because like they don't have to put any more effort into this race if they didn't want, like, if I know some of these campaigns are running out of money and people are not wanting to work for them if they're not winning races or whatever.
Okay.
But dropping out today or this weekend when there's a big vote tomorrow, that they could just literally, hang out and some people would vote for them. Right. So like they're not even waiting to see if some surprise could come out of this contest. There's clearly a strategic rationale behind boosting most likely Biden as
or
a
Warren,
mainstream.
maybe.
I don't think there's a lot of support for her in the party.
Yeah,
definitely like a lot of voters respect her to varying degrees, and I think a lot of like Bernie Sanders supporters would probably support her if he weren't running. But as far as the other campaigns and the committee and whatnot, I don't think there's a lot of backing for her politics, for her candidacy, for anything that she stands for. And so like she just can't, she's not really competing with Bernie Sanders.
Hey, it's going down at the border. Tears gonna tear down the border. Deep on the kids get gas torture. We're gonna get ridiculed and border. Hey, it's going down at the border. Tears gonna tear down the border. Deep on the kids get gas torture. We're gonna get ridiculed and borders. We can watch the pigs go free. Secret plot to control. We erase with impunity. Displace whole community. It's border patrol. They torture their souls. They maintain control. Kill 16-year-olds. And yet free they roam. Aim on tots for gas attacks. Lobby bombs are mass events. Ravage homes in Honduras. Attack moms at the borders. Systems of control. The flag is the goal. Otherness extol. Numberless pay toll. Hey, it's going down at the border. Tears gonna tear down the border. Deep on the kids get gas torture. We're gonna get ridiculed and border. Hey, it's going down at the border. Tears gonna tear down the border. Deep on the kids get gas torture. We're gonna get ridiculed and border. Hey, it's going down at the border. Tears gonna tear down the border. Deep on the kids get gas torture. We're gonna get ridiculed and borders.
For various reasons. But
Yeah. I'm still surprised Biden is getting votes.
Really?
It's a lot of money and a lot of fucking investment. Yeah, but you gotta
It's just shooting in the whole race in the foot, but.
They don't think that.
I know. They don't
after
think that. I know they don't think that.
They don't realize
it's insane,
that.
but like
it's the Obama argument. Like he's endorsed by one black person. So that's
like also the whole thing with South Carolina and the black vote, especially in the South. I spent a lot of time in Virginia, but like there's definitely a different political calculus in the South in terms of like liberal and leftist politics and the Democratic Party. the Republicans typically dominate these states' governments and win their statewide offices. Although that's changing. Like Virginia is more blue than Wisconsin for the past decade.
Right.
But yeah, so
is our vote tomorrow or is ours?
No, ours is in April.
Okay.
But I saw a Capital Times editorial by Paul Fanlin, and if you ever, I don't know if you guys read Paul Fanlin. I'm just gonna interject this for a second, but that guy is
plug
a total
or not.
He's like a total ridiculous, almost like a caricature of a milquetoast liberal who just he writes like articles complaining about people saying "Okay, boomer," and he's like the ultimate boomer, and he doesn't realize it. Yeah.
There's no plugs coming from the Wisconsin State Journal.
But yeah, he wrote an editorial a few weeks ago talking about this, and it's what he's saying is somewhat true. But these white commentators never acknowledged the role that they play in perpetuating these stories as influence peddlers. He's just like, I'm just a schmuck with an opinion, but like people listen to people like him, or especially people on TV, but. A lot of southern states, and especially in African American communities, which in a lot of southern states are really the only minority group, even though they comprise 50 or more 15% of population. But it's not like there are fewer Asian, Native American, and Hispanic people in a lot of at least the eastern southern states, other than like Florida. But a lot of the political calculation is basically that there aren't enough black voters to actually vote their agenda into office. And so they depend on the goodwill of ignorant but more or less well-meaning white liberal allies who actually always get to decide who the candidates and the elected office holders are. And especially before Obama, that was the way things were. Like a white man was going to be governor and going to be president and going to be senator, and like so black voters had to choose the lesser evil in every race, and their calculation always has to include in this strategic argument has to always include who they think will be the most palatable to the least bad white people. And so that's definitely not how everyone is voting. Every African American voter is voting.
But there are a lot
of white commentators who perpetuate this and don't realize the extent to which they're not only guilting progressive white voters into abandoning their politics because they're now suddenly like using white privilege against the electoral interests of this sort of mythical black community.
It's pretty, and it's a sick kind of game.
But it's also fear-mongering among minority voters by signaling to them that white people are going to throw them under the bus again and again, even though that doesn't have to be true. And so the election of Obama did definitely weaken that argument, but especially in a lot of southern states, that is actually a large part of the political calculation for Democratic Party voters whose states are going to vote for the Republican in November, almost certainly.
Right.
So this is their only chance to get some say over who the nominee is going to be, Democratic voters in those states. And so the idea that northern white liberals are going to vote for some, unelectable progressive who's going to lose to the scary white Republican who's, putting people in concentration camps and whatnot. Like, that's a real calculus that a lot of voters make around the country. Sure.
I'm good.
But, that's the narrative that's getting perpetuated in states like South Carolina when they vote. And those arguments, they carry a certain amount of self-perpetuating weight when people keep repeating them, because if you believe something's true and then you act as though it's true, it becomes sort of true in a way, but only by people changing how they behave is there potential to change the dynamic on the ground. And so that's really the base of support for Joe Biden's campaign, is this whole ideological apparatus that's maintaining this increasingly irrelevant electability myth around the, name recognition, palatable white dude.
Yeah, the Obama connection that he has is powerful. Also a strong campaign he's been running in South Carolina too, spending a lot of money, working with a lot of black organizations too that paid off. Bloomberg, I think spent a lot of money there. But yeah, that's just a farce. I guess they weren't going for that for the Bloomberg.
Yeah, and I think Biden has been spending less than every other candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, like his campaign was sort of dead for a bit.
His national campaign manager went on to Democracy Now! A few days ago.
Really?
I'm sorry,
Biden,
no, it was his South Carolina campaign.
Joe Biden's.
Joe Biden's, and had a lot of good things to say about his outreach into the black community and how he's been doing it better than others. Also, like Steyer got a mention for doing that too. Bloomberg not so much, but apparently. Yeah, I can't. So Bloomberg dropped out. Is that right?
No. Bloomberg's whole strategy from the
Yeah.
beginning has been to ignore the first 4 states.
Okay.
And everything hinges on tomorrow for Bloomberg.
I got you.
But
yeah, because I don't think he even showed up in with like any percents.
His whole campaign is a cruel joke.
Yeah, because Bloomberg with the stop and frisk campaign shit and the redlining was the best thing that happened to like the economy, and it's the reason the economy crashed, and all this bullshit, and like Biden with the Biden crime bill that is fucking super predator fucking rhetoric bullshit, and all this extremely racist rhetoric. But of course, Bloomberg wasn't ever vice president of Obama.
On top of acting like
and
the
biggest
campaign boomer ever.
Yeah.
He's painfully boomer.
I was saying this when you stepped out. It's just like that calculus. However, it's pretty illegitimate, and it doesn't win elections at all. Like, it's proven to not win.
No,
with Hillary Clinton, but
my lifetime is the Democrats shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, but that's the whole basis for Joe Biden's campaign.
Yeah.
Is that whole
Fear.
Belief in that strategic reasoning being sound, and voters can be persuaded to go along with it. Mostly out of fear.
Yeah,
but it doesn't.
You said that people have a memory of like 30 years. I would say they have a memory of 4 years.
No, I said they didn't have a memory.
Didn't have a memory.
Yeah, it's less. It's less.
I feel like it's like 4 years is the memory that people have.
Maybe even
two.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but some people can't remember the last election cycle.
Yeah. Not in a factual way. No, they remember it. They have feelings about it.
And
but
just
it's not.
think about an 18-year-old who was 14 that last election cycle, or the 15, 16-year-olds, and just that's relevant too, right?
Yeah.
So, speaking of that, because that's kind of like a big part of Bernie Sanders' base, right? This is younger voters who
big
are,
young vote.
Gen Y, is it like Gen Yers? Anyways,
I think it's Gen
young
Z
folks
or something.
Right. So do you think Bernie Sanders is a good solution to capitalism, Ross?
Well, I mean...
Oh, can I break that down a bit?
That's a loaded question.
Do that. Do it.
So I am a capitalism skeptic. I think that capitalism is a superficial facsimile added onto the political system, and it only really applies to poor people. So we live in a capitalist economy, but it's an entirely fictitious capitalist economy. We do work, we produce things, but those things that we produce don't have value in the Marxian sense.
Yeah, I gotcha.
They're basically thrown out into the void because there's a political need for human beings, human populations to be manageable by their overlords, so to speak. And it's much easier to manage people when most of our time is spent in authoritarian activity structures. And also, then we don't have energy, and we also buy into the whole ideological framework around that. But rich people do not live in a capitalist system at all. They don't use money.
No.
They don't expend resources to acquire goods and services. They use credit, which is not backed by any sort of value containing commodity or basis, It's credit rooted in other credit, and it just goes around and around in a big circle.
They live in a different world.
Yeah, so like the rules are not the same at all, and their power doesn't come from their ability to extract surplus labor from our surplus value from our labor.
Yeah, that's like more middle management stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's become increasingly more so over the 20th century. Especially like the whole global fascist movement around World War II that affected every country, every industrial country at least.
Yeah,
where bureaucratic control of the economy took over capitalist profit seeking, and only those capitalists who were willing to get on board with that project were able to maintain their position at the top of the structure, and it was through the bureaucracy.
Are you talking about like neoliberalism?
No, before that. I'm talking about in the United States, it was the New Deal, but also just the whole military-industrial complex. But similar things were going on in the Soviet Union, in Japan, and in Germany, and in France, and the UK.
Yeah.
And then later in China and in other countries.
Yeah, the world was a changing.
Yeah, so I think that we waste a lot of our time, and we also get misdirected by talking too much about capitalism, other in the most brutal, basic sense of the lowest orders of the working class and how our whole lives are being ground up in this machine. But that machine is a superficial addendum to, it's an appendage to a much bigger machine that is all about social control and political authority making. Yeah. And the product, the value that we create through our work is incidental to that, because most of the product of our labor is thrown out more or less immediately after it's created.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've always thought of that as two sides of the same coin, I guess. It's a fact of existing in capitalism, that it's built into it that some people have to be poor. You know what I mean? I feel like that is something that is ingrained in the system, because some people have to make very little profit off of what they do, and then some people make like a giant amount of profit off of very little that they do or something.
Yeah, I mean, like I've been on both sides of this, because the best paying job I ever had by far was the job that created the least value by far. And basically, and I was part of a project where a large corporation was throwing out millions of dollars per hour to cover up a simple mistake that they made in their factories by neglecting basic safety issues. And so, I was able to get a large income reading documents for them and sifting them and translating them and stuff. And the whole thing was a huge farce. Like, people had died using products that engineers had warned them about. But
but in the sake of what, productivity stuff kept going?
I don't know if it's productivity so much as stability, and I think that is the key factor in most decision making at the top, is that stability is what's sought, not profit. Profit is an avenue towards stability, and so there's a class of capitalists who are just blatant profit seekers, and they're an important part of the system, but they have the ability to tank the entire system as well. And so the real ruling class is a sort of machinic bureaucracy who operates on a sort of automated basis. And they have
like bootlickers? Is that what you, like?
There are bootleggers in the system for sure, but at the top of the system, these are the people in charge, and they're not bootlickers. And in fact, the capitalists are more often the bootlickers in this scenario. The capitalists are the ones who have to go, beg the bureaucratic overlords not to tax away all of their profits and to regulate their industries out of existence, which they have the authority to do and have had for a long time. They choose not to do that for political reasons, not for economic profit accumulating reasons. And that's an important distinction. The capitalists are profit accumulators, but they're subservient to the bigger system. And Marxists and leftists tend to invert that relationship entirely because we spend so much time thinking about capitalist accumulation and value-based, surplus value-based exploitation in the workplace that it seems self-evident that capitalists must be at the top of the pyramid. But that value that we're creating is not actually the generator of what keeps society going. It's political stability. It's people not challenging things. It's people spending most of their time at work, whether they're creating value or not. And it's people adopting the worldviews of the ruling class, and and believing what they're told, not challenging things, not taking action in their own interest. That's what keeps the system going.
Well, I guess again, I've always thought of those as the same people in my mind.
So would you say that Bernie Sanders would be a good solution or a good way, a viable way to democratize like the social control in the society? Then, therefore, or a way to sort of give more power, or to get rid of social control of the ruling class?
Well, I think if he could get his way in the things that he's talking about, I think he would weaken the capitalist class that exists, which is not the ruling class. It's a separate group of people who are underneath the ones in charge, and have less power than them. But they play a crucial role in the oppressive version of society that we live in. And so by weakening them, it would be a positive thing, although they wouldn't take it without fighting back.
So you're talking about like CEOs of like
Mark Zuckerberg.
Multinational corporations?
Mark Zuckerberg is not the ruling class, but he's a classic capitalist. He's a capitalist in the Marxist sense.
Yeah.
But he's not part of the ruling class, but he is the ruler of a little fief that he's created.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm asking is, what is the ruling class?
The Trilateral Commission?
Yeah, the ruling class is the various government agencies that rule the entire world. It's mostly international organizations. It's the heads of state of the most powerful countries, so the President of the United States, but also the President of China, the Prime Minister, and the cabinets of all these countries, the UK and
so you're making
NATO.
You're making like a distinction between
these are,
that and like the business ruling class.
The business, the capitalist class, which does not rule, has to play by the rules created for them by these transnational organizations and political folks.
But sometimes the same people interchange between those.
Because
those
classes are not distinct categories.
They definitely hold each other's hands.
But Barack Obama is not a capitalist, but Donald Trump is a capitalist and he's the president. So it's like it's not, these aren't clear-cut categories when you're talking about real existing human beings.
I think it's that's what I like about these kinds of discussions is defining these things, because that's a step that some people don't take.
Categorization actually has to a certain extent, it kind of blurs the reality of the situation, because we want to even talking about like a ruling class is not always a meaningful concept.
The capitalist thing is a kind of catch-all for those that we see as supporting like the economic system above human interest.
I
guess for some, but then there's the class reductionists who tend to exaggerate the importance of the capitalist class being where we should take the fight to, or whatever.
I think it lets the real ruling class off the hook in a lot of cases.
What about the chances of the Democratic Party accepting Bernie Sanders? Do you think they have an interest in doing that or not doing that?
I think personally, I think that long term it should be an interest of theirs. But I don't think that they think that it is in their interest right now.
Why do you think it's in their interest?
Do you think it's
inherently in their interest to win the election?
I think it's inherently in their interest to support Bernie just because of the, legitimacy it gives to them long term. Because I think that Bernie is on the right side of history on more issues than the party typically is these days. And I think that he's definitely a disruptor candidate or whatever to the Democratic Party. But I think it's something that will push them further in the direction that, you know, is less corporate, I suppose, if that, you know, can hopefully be a thing. But you know, it's he is one of those people that has, you know, inspired a lot of random young people to just get involved in local politics. So I think it's just the change in thinking toward local politics that's a good thing that I'm drawn to the most about him. So I've actually seen Bernie. Like I went to one of the things with my dad or whatever.
Oh yeah, you said fucking what's the band that played at there? You mentioned in text.
Public Enemy.
Public Enemy.
Yeah, they just fired
played
Flavor
at a Bernie.
Like today.
Oh, for real?
What?
Yeah, Public Enemy.
He's kind of right winger.
No, he won't do free shows.
Oh, I gotcha.
And he sent a cease and desist letter to the Sanders campaign with a handwritten note that said, "Don't do it, Bernie." And it was because Chuck D and other members of Public Enemy Radio. I was looking at all this just this afternoon, but there's Public Enemy Radio is kind of an offshoot of Public Enemy because Flavor Flav refused to do any shows that weren't for profit. And because they used Public Enemy symbolism in promoting the rally, including his clock, that he saw like, I'm not involved in this, but they're still using my persona and my brand to promote it. And so he sent the letter to them and they kicked him out after all these years. So he's,
Oh, wow.
that happened today, I think.
That's hilarious.
That's insane.
Yeah. But it reminded me though of back, I didn't know about this in 2016, but the girl riot band,
Pussy Riot?
Tigra.
Sorry, we said girl riot.
Sorry. It's like a band, the singer of Bikini Kill started it later, and so it's like, you know, one of the like.
Oh yeah, hell yeah!
And so they wrote a song in 2016 called "I'm With Her." And it was a bland pro Hillary Clinton song, and it's kind of embarrassing to listen to. But
there was also this episode of Broad City. Did you see the episode of Broad City with Hillary Clinton?
All. Yeah,
the one with Hillary Clinton was such a that whole second half of the episode was just a Hillary Clinton ad campaign.
Yeah, campaign.
It was just That's what like really made, like, throughout the election I was like, yo dude, this isn't gonna go well. Like, you guys are talking about her like she's inevitable, and that rubs people the wrong way.
So I don't see you talking, Ross, about like fuck a Bernie or whatever necessarily, and then about like fuck a Bernie necessarily, like fuck Bernie.
Oh, no. I think that so Bernie is disrupting the entire political landscape,
right,
the same way that Trump did.
Yeah.
And so that in itself, like including what Trump did in terms of shaking up the stale, hopeless, this is the way it is and always will be political terrain, was a good thing. The problem was that he was the only one doing it, and there was no flip side to it.
Right.
And so when people say Bernie's like Trump and they say it like it's a bad thing, he's not like Trump in the sense that he's, you know, a brutal capitalist overlord misogynist who, like, you know, rapes women and puts children in concentration camp cages and like doesn't value any other human being in this world. Like, that's not the way that Bernie is like Trump. Bernie's like Trump in the sense that we lived in basically a dead society, and that's going to be the case until we drive off of a cliff, unless something changes direction. And if someone doesn't change the direction in a good way, someone's going to change it in a bad way. And that's everything that Trump represents right there, is basically that there was only force moving in his direction and not in any other. So definitely we need to obliterate all of the old stale crust at the top, which is, you know, he's part of it too, because he's an old white dude.
Yeah,
who's
I
been
was about
in
to say,
government for
like,
a long time.
I don't want to paint him as a hero.
It's the movement.
I think we need to live in a time past heroes.
Yeah, like
sense.
Let's abolish the presidency. That would be my.
But also, that's what I like about him, is that he doesn't act like a hero, I guess.
So you mentioned that he's like inspiring, Brad. You mentioned that he's inspiring young folks to get involved in local politics. And I wonder what folks' opinions are. Like the DSA in Madison, I'm a member of the group, and not because I like to do electoral campaigning. What's folks' opinions on spending a lot of time and energy doing electoral campaigning? And folks in the DSA argue that part of the whole process is we plug people into the community organizing, and we're getting involved where the energy is, so that we can get them involved in community grassroots organizing that seeks to build political power outside of the structures of the electoral system and stuff like that. And I don't know, I kind of am, my opinion is that you can do that without sort of spending all of the time electoral, with the electoral campaigning specifically. And I don't think necessarily like endorsements are the same as spending a lot of time and energy like knocking on doors with clipboards and whatnot. But do you see like spending time in presidential elections campaigning for Bernie or whoever as a useful use of energy and time, or would you rather see folks get involved in other types of organizing, or is it indeed a way to get people involved in other types of organizing?
Or
all
is
of
it
the
both?
above.
You think?
All of the above. Yeah, it depends on, everybody needs to make those decisions every time they do something.
Sure. Yep.
I think with community organizing, it's kind of like a exercise kind of thing. You need to just try it out a bunch, before you're going to be comfortable with it. Going out and talking to strangers of all ages about, really serious stuff is something that not everyone is used to doing. So I think that, he has inspired some people that get involved in local politics that even aren't necessarily Bernie heads, but like they took that message from him about, this is our thing or whatever, that's the whole, way he was marketing himself in the 2006 thing is
16.
Our 2016. Yeah. It's like our revolution. He kept on emphasizing all I am is because of, what you guys helped me do, which is, I think, part of what got people into that kind of community-minded, like smaller-minded, local thing, which is the net positive, because being concerned about who's being elected locally and actually showing up for those local elections is hugely important, and just like, making that exercise to be a part of the community on some level is what's important more than anything politically, Yeah. More important than anything that I think he stands for is just getting people in those circles. So
I got you.
Yeah.
Like I said, he's not like I'm not trying to put him on a pedestal, but it's a step in the right direction for mainstream left folks.
Yeah, clearly, even if he got elected and failed at pretty much everything he tried to do, it would be clearly a positive development, like in every respect. And I think that's just plainly the case for anyone with even the least bit of progressive or left-leaning bent. The idea of like opposing him because he's part of the establishment or he's a Democrat or like whatever, there's just no value in that kind of activity, even if you don't support him, even if you don't vote for him because you don't vote or because you won't vote for a Democrat or whatever. But like clearly, compared to any alternative even imaginable right now, it's hard. Like 5 years ago, it was impossible to even imagine this being a possibility of like a self-identified socialist who has improved on his own positions in the past 4 years since running, in terms of like listening,
he does
to people more, and like
he listens to his people below him.
Yeah, and also like incorporating people who supported him but had like misgivings about various aspects of him. Like it's clear that he's listened to a lot of people, but he's still like a very old white man who's been a politician for a really long time.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
he's running in one of the two worst parties in the global political system. And so like there's a lot of reasons to not be enthusiastic about him, especially given that there's so little sense of hope that he could get elected. But at this point, it's very clear, if anyone doubts it, that he could get elected and president. Even if the Democratic Party refuses to support him, because I think they won't. Like,
I don't think they will this time around.
Yeah, like we talk about the Democratic Party as an entity, but the Democratic Party as an entity doesn't really exist. There's a lot of people, and the people in charge of that entity stand to lose everything if what he stands for succeeds, because the party will still exist and they'll probably win more elections and like more people will participate, but those people will now be in charge of the party. It's going to be people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and like people who are only in the Democratic Party because there's this new wing of it that allows them to win elections and to have a say. But people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, people like Joe Biden, people like that, they stand to lose everything that they've built over the past 50 years in their position within this hierarchy. Whether they win elections or not, their positions are secure. And so they actually don't have a vested interest in winning elections if it means losing that structure. And so there's a real chance that they would sabotage Sanders' campaign at the expense of Trump winning re-election. There's a real possibility that they don't care enough.
They did it last time.
It's not their interests, just like the brass and the unions, business unions. To pull a weak analogy, so that was going to be my next question, but I got to wrap it up here pretty soon too. But it was like, what do folks think about I guess, is it going to be a contested convention if Bernie ends up winning all these delegates in Milwaukee? It's in Milwaukee this election cycle in October something, I believe. What kind of stops? And would they pull out at the Democratic National Convention? I guess it would just be having their super delegates vote against them.
I don't think it's like, I think this is a big part of what's wrong with the electoral cycle, is that we all spend a year of our lives every 4 years in this moment by moment, play by play analysis of speculation based on dubious data and things like that.
It's like a sport.
Yeah, like no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows who, it's not just who wins the states, but by what percentage and how many candidates get over 15%, whether they get any delegates at all. Yeah. And so like Bernie Sanders could end up getting like 100% of the delegates in California without getting more than 35% of the vote. That's less likely now that all these candidates have dropped out. But but like no one knows how many delegates anyone's going to actually go into the convention with in the summer, never mind how the party's going to react to it.
Well, like this time around, they're not pledging the super delegates out the gate, right?
Right, yeah, they have to wait till
because
tally
that's
is done.
what shot Bernie in the foot last time.
Yeah, but the first primary he was already way behind.
He was so far behind. The first primary, it was
foolish.
But
bullshit.
I think the question we maybe should be asking, since the convention is in Milwaukee, is like, what are people going to be doing at the convention?
Convention's in Milwaukee?
Yeah,
in October. We have 3 percenters who are going to be
October?
making.
Is that close to the election?
I think so.
I thought it was in the summer.
Holy shit!
I might be wrong. But we have 3 percenters in Wisconsin who are plan on making a showing there, sort of like a proto-fascist organization. So they definitely have plans. The armed militia who are like Islamophobic and racist.
Those are the ones that came in. The neo-Nazis that came in, right? That one.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call them neo-Nazis, but I might call them proto-fascists.
Neo-Nazis.
But that's a whole other thingamajiggy. All right, so I gotta get wrapping up here. So we do like plugs.
Yeah. That's right. We usually do some plugs.
Do this thinking with me real quick, okay? Plugs.
Plugs.
Nice. That's what's
all right,
up.
Cool.
That was a tradition, but last episode, Brad didn't. Well, maybe it was.
I don't remember what I did last time. So
wasn't good. Okay, so we got plugs. Do you have any plugs? You got shows coming up, Ross?
We don't have anything booked right now.
All right, bet.
We'd like to maybe record if possible, and then see what goes on from there. But we all had a really good time at the show, and everyone felt really good. And
that's what's
hoping
up.
to do something else. So
hell yeah.
And you said what was your Instagram again?
Egg Pants Band.
Egg Pants Band.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, and check out Egg Pants. And if you see them on a flyer out there, like just go to that show.
And y'all would be posting your shows on Egg Pants Band on Instagram, right? If you follow
they'll be on there. And if you follow your favorite local Madison bands, then maybe we'll be opening for them, or maybe we'll book our own shows soon. I don't know, but
yeah. How many shows have you guys done yet?
5.
Okay.
Sweet.
Nice. So you guys are still kind of fresh.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad that there's more and more bands just popping up in Madison.
Hell yeah.
We need that. We need more and more bands.
So how about you, Brad? You got plugs?
I got the album concept hour as usual. We got next week. I think we got the Run the Jewels episode coming out.
Nice.
So Killer Mike, actually, he's one that has interviewed Bernie Sanders a couple times.
Yeah, endorsing again this time.
I would say, if you want a great interview of Bernie Sanders, check out those interviews with Killer Mike at his barbershop, and he did another one this year too.
Oh, good.
So if you want, that's, I think, the best interview Bernie Sanders has ever had, in my opinion. But it's great.
So y'all doing a concept hour?
Yep, we got more episodes coming out all the time. Rolling Stone is a little on hiatus right now. I'm trying to kind of find a new partner and shit.
All right.
So that's all I got kind of going right now.
Okay, bet. What about the one about your family?
Oh yeah, I have another one called Hero Worship, and there's a lot of stories about my family members. I'm gonna try to get some new episodes about my mom and my dad out soon.
That's what's
for that
up.
one. So
right on.
Yeah.
So some plugs for myself, Lil Guillotine. Working on a song with MC Soul, who's a big time, as far as far left anarchist rap, underground hip hop artists go. It's actually about election stuff, so very relevant.
Okay.
I actually plan on. I wrote it over the last couple weeks, my verses, and plan on recording it tomorrow during Super Tuesday. I had a goal of getting it released, or not released, but getting it done and getting a pre-save link done by Super Tuesday. That's not gonna happen. But I'll record it by tomorrow at Super Tuesday, and then I got some songs in the pipe. One with a black anarchist out of Seattle. One with a wobbly out of New York City I met. It's got some real alternative type of freaking real mind fucky psychedelic music that I'm going to be rapping over. And then another one with an anarchist out of Twin Cities. So yeah, those should be some good 4 songs. And so yeah, that's my plugs.
Yeah, also just a reminder, check out Red Madison DSA, man. Yeah, I know we mentioned it last episode with Dana, but I'm sure do they have another one out right now?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep,
yeah, that's what I
out.
thought. Yeah, they have their second episode,
that's
or
right.
second thing out. So.
Edition. I haven't had a chance to
check that stuff out.
To read it. Well, thanks Ross for coming by. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And peace out, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.